Hey guys, I'm Janet, and welcome back to episode 2 of our High Elf lore play. So, yeah, we're going to talk more about Ulthuan, because we're here. You know, we've just got it. It's ours now. And, yeah, no one can have it. It's ours, alright? We're keeping it. So, anyway, there are two other units I want to talk about that are predominantly, you know, things from Ulthuan. So, the first one is the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower. That's right, that's actually it's more of a nautical thing. It's what they put on their ships. But we're going to talk about that another time, because I want to recruit one before we talk about it. But also, there's the Ulthuan Sea Helms. Right? So, Sea Helms are the greatest heroes of Ulthuan, an order founded in the time of Belshazzar. He was a big seafaring Phoenix King, by the way. He was the one that really branched out, which was, you know, really impressive at the time. So, Sea Helms, makes sense that he'd do it, because he was a big seafaring guy that, you know, colonised most of the world. That's just a bit of, you know, extra. So anyway, with both spear and bow, they have perfected the Quicksilver Strike that cheats shields and parries to pierce throats, hearts, or skulls. Sea Helms often take their place amongst the ranks of the Lothern Sea Guard, so that their presence might inspire others to greatness. The Sea Helms' finely honed instincts combine with Sea Guard's discipline to create a force that can swiftly adapt to changing fortunes. However, most Sea Helms choose to fight from the back of a swift Lothern Sky Cutter. The better to dart through volleys of arrow and bolt, swoop into the heart of the foe, and fell an enemy hero with a single strike. Such an attack takes great steadiness of nerve and spear arm, but the Sea Helms have both aplenty. So that's right, we're talking about the Lothern Sky Cutter, which is just such a cool unit. It's clearly, it was when they were transitioning to the whole Age of Sigmar, like, crazy stuff, but I think it still fits really well. Because, you know, it's a flying chariot, right? So, Lothern Sky Cutters. When the swift hawk ships of Ulthuan slip their moorings, that's actually just what they call them, ships, generally. Anyway, they are accompanied to the open sea by Sky Cutters, sleek airborne chariots that rest upon a cushion of magic and are drawn into battle by the swift feather rocks that nest along the glittering coast. They basically just look like eagles. They're basically like a giant eagle, but they're not. They're a seabird, whereas an eagle, I guess, isn't. So, you know. So they nest along the glittering coast. These serve as the eyes and ears of Ulthuan's fleets, allowing them to plan engagements long before the enemy is even aware of their presence. Sky Cutters also serve as the outriders of Ulthuan's armies, for they can go where the grounded kin cannot. Should a Sky Cutter's crew encounter a foe, their goal is to clear the skies, ensuring that Ulthuan will dominate the heavens in the battle to come. The bows of the Sea Guard crew can harry lesser troops, but larger foes ignore their arrows. Thus do the crew favour the compact Eagle Eye Bolt Thrower, whose steel shots can deal a ruinous blow to even the mightiest of beasts. These prized weapons are mounted upon the Sky Cutter's prow, allowing the Sea Guard crew to maintain a constant barrage of fire, even as they dive into the fray. Which I just think is so cool. So they're flying chariots, guys. They're not in the game yet, but they might be soon. I hope they are, because they're really interesting. The fact is, they're a flying chariot. You think that's crazy, you know? A chariot that's flying through the air, just pulled around by a bird, like a kite with a bolt thrower on it. Madness. But come on, it's the High Elves. They use magic to keep their entire continent afloat. You know, you think they can't make a chariot fly around? It's pretty damn cool. I think it's a lot of fun. Like a flying artillery piece. It's not as powerful as the bolt thrower, and it only has the one sort of fire, basically. It only has the normal, you know, shot. It doesn't have the, you know, scatter shot that the regular bolt throwers do. It's a lot smaller version, you know, so it's not as powerful. But that's actually not saying a lot, because the bolt thrower in Warhammer is a bit rubbish, honestly. But anyway, so yeah, the Lothern Sky Cutter. I really hope that comes into the game soon, because I think it'd be really interesting. So with Ulthuan being such like a nautical, you know, thing, it's all about their navies, right? That's their big thing. You know, they're very much the defenders of the sea, right? They're the sailors that, you know, begin every invasion, you know, far afield, and they're the ones that defend against, you know, invading fleets. They are basically the vanguard of Ulthuan in general, right? So, you know, so a lot of nautical influences, and you can't really have that in Warhammer without having a god of the sea, right? So the elven god of the sea is actually Mathlan, which sounds suspiciously like the Imperial god of the sea, Manan. So Mathlan Lord of the Deeps. Mathlan is a fickle god, distrusted by many of Ulthuan's folk. He is a king of storm and sea, ruler of all those creatures who dwell below the waves, and has little love for any of dry land's creatures. Only the mariners of Cathik and Lethern have any love for the Lord of the Deeps, and they embrace him as patriarch far more willingly than they do Kernos or Asuryan. Such behaviour is disapproved of in other corners of Ulthuan, where tradition portrays Mathlan as a destructive deity, but such scorn has little impact on those elves who live, whose lives and livelihoods rely on safe passage on the open seas. So all of that was actually from the 8th edition High Elves Army book. But while we're on the subject of religion, I want to get the human perspective on it, because I think that's amusing. Because it gives you a summary, but also it's sort of, if you guys watch the Empire campaign lore play, then I think it's nice to sort of, you know, from us humans, right, what we think of these elves. I think it's quite fun. So, Elven religion. This I'm actually reading from Signs of Faith, which is a 3rd edition Warhammer Fantasy roleplay supplement. So, many people in the Empire, particularly rural folk, have few dealings with either High Elves or Wood Elves. Elven religion, like the rest of their customs, remains a mystery to most men. However, people who spend time in the company of an elf may learn a little bit about their faith. The name of Asuryan, Lord of the Elven Pantheon, is whispered with great reverence when mentioned by elves. Hoeth is their god of knowledge, whose magic-wielding servants dwell in a white tower that reaches to the stars, guarded by legendary warriors. Vul is the divine smith, crippled and blind. His priests apparently put out their eyes to honour him. Humans cannot explain why elves would want to worship a crippled deity. He is said to be chained to his anvil by the war god Cain. His name is anathema to men of the Empire. A god called Cain is worshipped by human murderers, and this cult is banned in all Imperial provinces. That elves worship a god with the same name does nothing to calm men's fearful suspicion of this race. Those gods described above, as well as others, seem to be highly favoured by High Elves. The Wood Elves honour above all Kernos, the Hunter, the wild lord of beasts and forest. Kernos is said to lead a wild hunt every springtide, collecting the souls of men who stray too close to the mysterious forest of Atilla. He is the consort of Isha, the goddess who rules the forest in the aspect of Queen Ariel. Ariel. Ariel? Queen Ariel. I never know how to pronounce that. I don't know why. It's something about it bothers me. I don't know. She is said to bring life from death with a whisper. The strangest god is Loic, the trickster, whose devotees are mysterious tattooed warriors who weave weird dances in the midst of battle. High Elves treat the Imperial gods with respect, but do not enter their temples. They never appear to perform any outward display of worship to their own gods. Wood Elves sometimes mock mankind's need to shackle their gods behind stone walls. They have a quiet reverence for the natural world, much like the followers of Tal, though Talists distrust Wood Elves as much as other men do. Tal is the, god of forest and stuff in the Empire, in the Imperial pantheon. Like Tal's followers, Wood Elves revere the stone circles found in the wilderness and go to great lengths to preserve them from chaos. So I find that interesting, just generally. The fact that there's, there's that sort of that pantheon. It does mimic a lot of stuff in the Empire, but then the Empire don't outwardly worship things like, deities like Cain, that are, the god of murder. Yet people do revere him, well, murderers do, right? It's illegal worship, but some people do. And I just find it amusing that there's a lot of similarities between each pantheon. There's constant sort of overlap between them, so you're never really sure if they're the same gods or not, or if they're different aspects of the same god, or, whatever. I mean, Mathlan and Manan, they're pretty close, that's pretty similar. So I find that interesting. It could just be a language thing has changed. Humans have basically evolved without elves nearby, right? So they've just got a slightly different version of it, but it's the same god that they're worshipping. But yet, Cain, god of murder, that's something that the High Elves sort of respect. Obviously, the Dark Elves went and took it too far, right? But I think the High Elves have a more sort of all-round approach when it comes to their religions. They sort of revere every god because they know that none of them should be trifled with. Whereas humans would be like, nope, that's a bad thing, everyone keep away from it. It's bad. obviously, the High Elves, that didn't really go well for them, you know, having that well-balanced diet of deities, because, you know, the Dark Elves exist now, and that was a bad thing. So, yeah, not great. But I find it interesting, you know, the two cultures, sort of different approaches to the same stuff, essentially. And also one other little smidge here. There are other minor deities within the Empire, right? So some regional and some, you know, other aspects of the main pantheon, right? And here it actually says some minor deities are aspects of an official Empire deity, and thus tolerated by the official cults. Aspects of Tal include Karog, god of rivers, and Karnos, lord of beasts. That's right, Karnos. Sounds a lot like Kernos, doesn't it? Right? Like, there's a lot of similarities, a lot of overlap with that stuff, and you know, and they're worshipped freely and openly, legally, right, in the Empire. But they are so close to the Elven pantheon, some of these things, that it kind of makes you wonder, right? So it's fun. So also, you guys might wonder what on earth we're doing fighting with Yvresse right now. We start a war with them, and I like to think it's because their lord isn't home. So they've been manipulated somewhat. But we're going to talk about Yvresse. It's an odd place. So Yvresse, that's the place to the, you know, the east that we're fighting. Yvresse is the land of mists. It encompasses not only a sizable part of eastern Ulthuan, but also the islands of the Eastern Ocean. The mainland is a wild coastline, fringed by deep coniferous forests. The foothills of the Anulii March often form distant peaks that tower dramatically into the clouds. Yvresse is the least densely populated kingdom of Ulthuan, and by those elves from other realms it is often considered a bleak coastal realm and less than lovely. But to those who call it their home, the towering cliffs and soaring seabirds are sights as fine as any to be seen on the continent of Ulthuan. To the east of the mainland are the Shifting Isles. This is an area shrouded in legend, where ancient spells of illusion shield the eastern coast of Ulthuan from intruders. The whole area is wreathed in mists, and within these billowing clouds, strange and terrifying things are often seen. Whether they are the products of men's ensorcelled imaginations, or whether they actually exist, is something not often discussed. However, the Shifting Isles definitely live up to their name, and each is seldom encountered twice in the same spot. This creates treacherous mazes of shoals and sandbars, which can confuse even high elf sailors. Yvresse has only one major city, Tor Yvresse, a metropolis as beautiful and grand as any of the elf cities of old. Sadly, its glory days are long past. Many of the old mansions are uninhabited, and the great amphitheatres are silent and empty. The walls of the city are mighty and deep, but there are never enough warriors to man them, and many wonder if the city could withstand another serious invasion. And so immediately, that is really cool. The fact that they have, you know, an entire part of the continent that is just shrouded in mist to stop people from finding the continent at all. I think that's cool. The idea of the islands themselves being enchanted is pretty sweet. So, but their lord, right? The elven lord of Tor Yvresse, his title being the Warden of Tor Yvresse, is Eltharion the Grim. So, Eltharion the Grim is one of the greatest of all elven lords. Many times he has achieved what would have been thought impossible. It was Eltharion who was the first of Ulthuan's generals to dare an assault on Nagarond itself and live to speak of it, and he who finally brought about the defeat of War Grom. And, yeah, that's Grom the Paunch, the greenskin, you know, goblin, soon to be legendary lord, hopefully, fingers crossed. I'm really hoping on that one. He's a cool guy. He almost destroyed Ulthuan. It was hilarious. He almost sank it. So anyway, for his valour in that battle, Eltharion was elected Warden of Tor Yvresse, and though he is a dour ruler, the people of that fair city love him dearly. Eltharion's early rule was split equally between scouring greenskins from the land and overseeing repairs to Yvresse's network of waystones. And the reason why he had to repair all those waystones is because Grom the Paunch's war basically destroyed them all and almost sank Ulthuan, which is hilarious. Anyway, in the first task, Eltharion was aided by the nobles of his realm, who rallied to his banner with an enthusiasm not seen for many long generations. In the second, he sought the assistance of the Lawmaster Belinair. Though Eltharion had successfully stabilised the waystone of Tor Yvresse, he felt that luck had guided his hand rather more than judgment in that task, and he did not wish to see ill fortune or rashness on his part destroy Ulthuan. With his realm thus secured, Eltharion took his blade overseas, not to the chill shores of Nagaroth in the west, but east to the lands of the Old World and beyond. Yvresse had but barely endured the onset of one war, and Eltharion swore that no other would reach Ulthuan's shores. Atop his griffin, Stormwing, awesome name for a griffin, definitely. They've all got awesome names. Stormwing, Deathclaw, I'm sure there's others. Anyway, Eltharion swept through the Badlands like a wind of blades. He slaughtered war bosses and ran their armies to ruin. He toppled orc fortresses and had survived earthquakes, Bretonnian crusades, and the vengeance of the dwarves. Yet, miraculously, there always seemed to be more greenskins for him to fight. Finally, Eltharion learned the truth. His reputation had spread so far and wide that war bosses were actually seeking his army, knowing that the pointy head would give him a proper fight. This revelation ended Eltharion's battles in the Badlands. He now knew that to continue would not abate the greenskins' threat. Returning to Yvresse, Eltharion began to train its armies and fortify its cities as never before. The next time a war made landfall on the shores of Ulthuan, the folk of Yvresse and their grim warden would be ready for them. So, a bit of speculation here for Total War Warhammer. I've got a feeling he might be added along with Grom the Paunch at some point. And I'm thinking Tor of Yvresse being at war with Luthern is basically just to give a threat in that direction. But I think at some point that'll be replaced with the even greater threat of War Grom turning up on that shore. And I reckon Eltharion the Grim could be a legendary lord, you know, commanding Yvresse. Which would be pretty cool, you know. It would make that whole part of the campaign much more interesting than just fighting some high elves for a bit for some reason. But I think it's easy to just sort of dismiss as, at this point, Eltharion the Grim is off fighting wars somewhere, and while he's not home, the Dark Elves have been, you know, plotting and scheming and, you know, sort of poisoning the minds of the noblemen. Whatever nobles are left there, you know. So I think it's fun, and you can kind of headcanon some of this yourself to make it more interesting. But it kind of makes sense, you know. He's not in the game, right? He's probably left, you know. He's gone off to the Badlands to go fight stuff. So I like to assume that that's the case, you know. Either way, though, I'm sure he's gonna be livid when he gets back. So, we've spoken a bit about, you know, the different rulers, the places, and all the rest of it, but the fact that this place is a bit of a mess, right? There's the Phoenix King, he's obviously at the top, and a load of noblemen and different lords and things reigning over different provinces, and they seem to sort of elect different people and whatnot. It's all crazy. So, I think we should go into some detail about that, because I don't really understand, you know, a nation unless you know how it works. So, with that, let's talk about the Phoenix Kings. So, Ulthuan is ruled by a collection of princes, princesses, and mages, above whom preside the Phoenix King and the Everqueen. The relationship between these rulers is not as simple as the titles would suggest. The kingship is elective, while the queenship is hereditary, and both monarchs maintain entirely separate courts. The Everqueen is always the Queen of Avalorn. Her realm is the site of the principal shrine of the Earth Mother, and she is regarded as the spiritual leader of the whole Elven realm. The position of Everqueen is always taken up by the firstborn daughter of the previous queen, conceived during her year-long ritual marriage to the Phoenix King. After this formal marriage, they are free to take new consorts, but only the daughter conceived from the marriage of the Phoenix King and the Everqueen can be the new Everqueen. Hence, the Queens of Avalorn have always been the Everqueens of Ulthuan, forming an unbroken chain from ages past. By contrast, the Phoenix King is chosen from among the princes of Ulthuan, 1 year after the death of the previous incumbent. Each is crowned during a holy ceremony, held at a massive pyramidal shrine of Asaurian, which we've now conquered, yes, it's us, good for us, and attended by the legions of the Phoenix Guard and the princes of Ulthuan. The process of choosing the new Phoenix King is rife with intrigue. Emotions often run hot during this fraught and delicate event. Traditionally, the last 30 days of the year of mourning are set aside for the election to take place. However, in practice, the debate starts much sooner than that. Often the politicking starts long before the reigning Phoenix King has died. High Elves love intrigue. That's actually a mechanic in Total War Warhammer, so they got that right. So that's good. And never is the prize greater than when a new Phoenix King is chosen. The grandest of Ulthuan's noble families each look for their candidate to be chosen, and they vie for the support of their peers for their choice. Further to this, each realm in Ulthuan desires the new Phoenix King to be chosen from their land. So it is that rivalries are set aside, or created, to ensure that the agendas of the noble houses are met. For all the deception, manipulation, and chicanery employed during the election process, it is almost unheard of for the tactics employed to escalate to violence or outright sabotage. Such actions are considered heretical, for the Phoenix King is the anointed servant of Asuryan. Few High Elf nobles are so consumed with the victory that they could believe, even for a moment, that the Creator God would ever approve of a king selected by the ruling council under such dubious and destructive circumstances. So I do like that, because basically that takes us back to the Sundering, where Malekith basically decided to go ahead and kill the Phoenix King and try and become it himself by walking into the fires of Asuryan. So I kind of like the fact that it's, you know, that's considered a bad thing. No one really wants to go and pull a Malekith, right? Because that didn't work out so well. Asuryan wasn't best pleased about it. So although there's a lot of politicking and, you know, political backstabbing, there's no literal, you know, backstabbing. Because frankly, a noble's not going to be worth it, right? He's not going to be worthy of the title if he's had to resort to that. So there is some nobility there, you know, there is some like genuine sort of, well, chivalry, I guess, which I think is quite interesting. So I did say I wanted to stick to current affairs with this series, you know, what the elves are like now. But of course elves live a long time. So to actually talk about their current Phoenix King, yeah, we're going back 1,000 years. Well, up to 1,000 years. I'm not entirely sure the exact date that a lot of this happens. But it's within 1503 and 2163 that this happens. And that is in the time of Bel Hathor, which was the Phoenix King before the one we have now, which is Finubar. So during the reign of Bel Hathor. And so this basically takes place where suddenly they get, you know, the attention of men. Men have started spreading around the world, and they thought Ulthuan seems like a cool place. So, in 2 short millennia, the race of man had risen from savagery to being the dominant race in the lands east of Ulthuan. Norse longship raids, which had long been dismissed as trivial irritants, grew to such frequency and fury that the High Elf Navy could no longer contain their threat. Realizing that the attacks would only become worse over time, Bel Hathor called a convocation of all the greatest mages and instructed them to guard Ulthuan's eastern approaches. After 3 decades of preparation, the magicians enshrouded the island's approaches in a maze of spells, illusions, and treacherous shifting shoals and mists. It became virtually impossible for Norse raiders to reach Ulthuan, except by pure chance. Legend of these terrible sea routes reached the old world and caused the men to talk of the elf realm with dread. So, guys, that's how Yvresse got all misty and weird and, you know, had all the islands that moved and stuff. That was because of that. There's basically, they put that as a deterrent afterwards, you know, after the fact. It wasn't anything to do with, you know, chaos invading or anything like that. No, it's just Norsemen turning up, being a bit, you know, enterprising, which I think is a lot of fun. So that explains that phenomenon. So, the Norse were not the only men to dare the sea routes to Ulthuan. Increasingly, other naval powers, and particularly the Empire and Bretonnia, also sent ships west over the ocean, seeking Ulthuan and the legendary golden cities of Lustria. Some of these determined mariners, and eventually some of their ships, found a route to Ulthuan. The Phoenix King, Bel Hathor at the time, issued an edict forbidding them to set foot on Elven soil. He did, however, agree to let Finubar, Prince of Eataine, take ship with them, to learn more of these emergent realms. Finubar sailed to Longueuil in Bretonnia, and from there spent 50 years wandering over the continent. Because of the ancient feud with the dwarfs, it had been a long time since any high elf had set foot on the shores of the eastern continent. He was at once impressed and appalled at what he saw. The human realms were endless, teeming and populous. Finubar had expected mud huts, primitive savages, and anarchy unbound. Instead, he found mighty walled cities and disciplined armies, capable of fending off the orcs and keeping the peace over huge stretches of territory. He saw that the humans were numerous and becoming more so, and that it is only a matter of time before they would eclipse even the elder races. In addition, Finubar was fascinated by the humans' crude vitality and exuberant culture, their energy and greed. He swiftly decided that it would be better for the elves to have these people as allies rather than enemies. In his travels, he also came upon the lost elf realm of Atilla. He was both shocked and amazed by what he found there. The elves of the old frontier province had taken a far different path from the high elves. They had become one with their woodland home, as far removed from the high elves of Ulthuan as were the dark elves of Nagaroth. Ever after, they were known to their kin on Ulthuan as the Wood Elves. That's what we called them too. Though the elves of Atilla were not unfriendly to Finnebar, further approachment proved impossible, and any ambassadors dispatched from Ulthuan were treated with indifference at best. When Finnebar finally returned to Ulthuan, he was hailed as a great hero. The Phoenix King listened to Finnebar's report and reversed his earlier edict denying the men of the Old World access to Ulthuan. At Finnebar's request, the city of Lethern was opened to human merchants, and elf pilots were provided to guide the trading fleets through the veiled approaches. These races of men were inclined towards seamanship, wasted no time in travelling to the island continent of Ulthuan to see its wonders for themselves. Thus began a second period of explosive growth in Lethern. Finnebar watched his home city become the largest trading port in the world, and was happy. The humans were astounded by the grace and majesty of elf civilization, and well pleased with the commerce that went on there. The elves were content to have powerful allies in the old world. When Balhathor died peacefully of old age, Finnebar was his chosen successor. So what I like about all that is basically it explains what is going on with both of the places we've been talking about. So that's why Lethern is this amazing, just port, with its incredible commerce, and it's also the only place that people outside of Ulthuan, humans and the like, are allowed to go. And I think that's fantastic to see there's actually history, like a historical reason for that is explained, and it also explains why Yvresse is this crazy, misted, shrouded nonsense land. So it just gives a lot of context for why Ulthuan is the way it is, because it is pretty mystical, let's be honest. It's a crazy magical place. So it's interesting to see that, the history does dictate these little nuances and strange, behaviour of people, of elves. It's pretty cool. So, with the invaluable experience gained during his sojourn into the old world, Finnebar of Lethern was the prince best suited to understanding this new age. By temperament and experience, he was ready to deal with the race of men, and as a native of Lethern, he had grown up with the understanding of the worth of trade and a tolerant, cosmopolitan outlook on the world. In accordance with Balhathor's wishes, the ruling council elected Finnebar. Thus, Finnebar was the first Phoenix King to be chosen by his predecessor.
We have shaped this world.
A few amongst the ruling council were displeased with this appointment. Perhaps they thought such a succession a break with all tradition. More likely, their sentiments were born of jealousy. Finnebar's actions did little to end such concerns. From the start, he was often content to leave the day-to-day affairs of his realm to the trusted members of his court. Indeed, in the early years of his reign, it seemed he was but an infrequent visitor to his own realm, for he spent much time travelling the world. Finnebar's rivals spread rumour in his absence, their eyes ever on claiming the Phoenix throne they were once denied. In the end, rebellious tongues were only stilled when the Everqueen, Alariel, arrived unannounced at a meeting of the ruling council. Standing before the Phoenix throne, she fixed her piercing gaze on each of the council in turn, and in icy tones reminded the princes where their loyalties truly lay. Therefore, thereafter, criticisms of Finnebar's rule were decidedly muted. As the years passed, Finnebar's voyages became more sporadic, though none could say whether his wanderlust was finally leaving him, or he had simply found whatever it was he searched for. Increasingly, Finnebar split his time between the business of rule and taking counsel with Balaner, one of the oldest and wisest lawmasters of Hoeth. If you remember, that's the same mage that Altharion sought counsel from. In the 138th year of Finnebar's reign, the Great Chaos Incursion began, and it looked as if the Dark Powers had returned once more to claim the world. The Witch King himself returned at the head of a mighty host, and swept the defenders of Ulthuan before him. War raged across all Ulthuan's kingdoms. Avalon burned, and for a time it seemed as if the Everqueen was lost amongst the carnage, and the realm with her. Then, two mighty heroes, the twin brothers Tyrion and Teclis, arose to secure the realm and repel the invasion. I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit more at some point. By the efforts of the extraordinary twins, the Dark Elves were driven off, and Ulthuan was rescued from the brink of destruction. Finnebar was greatly pleased by the twins' deeds, and brought them ever closer into his councils. The Phoenix King deemed that the last war had been merely the opening skirmish of a new age of destruction, and was determined to command the loyalty of Ulthuan's mightiest heroes. In the years that followed, other heroes would join Tyrion and Teclis at Finnebar's side, some of whom would go on to become as famous as any of the Phoenix Kings. Since then, the world had grown darker. Despite the series of magical wards raised around the islands in the reign of Corhadris, Norse raids on Ulthuan had become ever more numerous. A horde of goblins led by Grom the Paunch of Misty Mountain had even managed to pillage eastern Ulthuan. Dark Elf raiders had continued to commit innumerable acts of piracy. The promise of a new golden age of peace has faded, and the elves and their new allies have looked once more to their weapons. For the elves, the present holds both the promise of renewal and the threat of destruction. Their old enemies have grown stronger, while they in turn have become weaker. Ulthuan can still muster the mightiest fleet in the known world, and its armies are rightly feared by its foes, and yet the High Elves are a shadow of their former glory. Indeed, many of Ulthuan feel the greatest days of the elves have passed. Yet every year brings new opportunities to win glory and fight against evil. There are still mighty elven heroes, courageous warriors, and mages willing to stand against the dark powers, and the mighty dragons, though few in number, are turning restless in their long sleep. In the north, the Witch King stirs once more, and the Widowmaker haunts the dreams of warriors, singing songs of forbidden glory to their desperate souls. Though they have dwindled and are weary, the High Elves still have a great part to play in the world before the final act of their long drama is played out. Okay guys, so that's going to be episode 2 done. We've done episode 2 now. So episode 3, well, it's a mystery what we're going to see, because I haven't actually played the next bit of the campaign to see what I bump into. But it should be fun. There's plenty more to talk about, a lot more heroes, a lot more magic, a lot of everything. High Elves pretty rich tapestry there, a lot of you know, famous battles and all sorts. It's a pretty busy place. All things considered. So please remember to comment, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good day, guys.